Hi, my name is Katlynne Wells, and today I will be responding to the claim that esports follow the same format as traditional sports. The supporting claims for the original argument were that 1, the supporting staff of esports mirrors traditional sports, 2, the amount of time and effort mimics traditional sports, and 3, the structure of the competition follows a similar structure to basketball. Now, before I go into the inconsistencies that I found within the evidence, I'd like to refresh on what the definition of esports is. It is a multiplayer game played by professional gamers for the entertainment of spectators and prizes. Now, with the first claim that the supporting staff of esports mirrors traditional sports, I found some inconsistencies. First off, the claim is irrelevant to the major claim since it does not relate to the format of sports. Plus, the sport has to have certain criteria that stems off from the definition, an activity involving physical exertion and skill that is governed by a set of rules or customs and often undertaken competitively. Now, based on this definition, the criteria of sports can be listed as such. Involves physical exertion and skill governed by a set of rules and is played competitively. Now, the format of a sport is how a sport is played or scored. Not about coaches or dietitians, as the advocate mentions in his argument. Also, one of the examples he uses is Rick Fox, a professional athlete that was once an LA Laker basketball player. And in the article that the advocate cited, why former LA Laker Rick Fox is betting big on esports in the Rolling Stones article, the only connection that Rick Fox made between esports and traditional sports was the competitive spirit seen in both. Next, the claim that the amount of time and effort mimics traditional sports. With this claim, there's still irrelevancy to the major claim because it still does not relate to the actual format of a sport. The claim refers to the prep of players, this mainly being that the members of an esport team move into a house and play together for 8 hours, which could almost be seen as a social time rather than prepping for a big tournament. And also, the effort that goes into esports is not the same as traditional sports. There's a lot more physical preparation in traditional sports, such as swimming. I was, in fact, a swimmer in high school, and I have played video games before, and there's a big difference in how much physical exertion you have to do. For example, for swimming, you're honing all the muscles in your body, from your arms to your back, to your core, to your legs. And when I would be playing video games, for example, a football game on Xbox, the only exertion I had to do was pushing the buttons fast enough, pushing the joystick, trying to catch a football before my brother or my dad. The last of the secondary claims I am responding to is that the structure of the competition follows a similar structure to basketball. Now, the original claim states that esports follows the same format, not similar to other sports, and that it's related to more than one sport. And also, the only similarities listed besides the format of the League of Legends tournament is that basketball games and esports are streamed similarly, and the commenting is similar in broadcasting. Now, to summarize my response to the argument that esports follow the same format as traditional sports, I found inconsistencies within the evidence for that the supporting staff of esports mirrors traditional sports, the amount of time and effort mimics traditional sports, and that the structure of the competition follows a similar structure to basketball. Once seeing my evidence, I hope you can see that the inconsistencies outlive the given evidence. Thank you.
Okay, the structure is okay. The first argument basically comes down to it's irrelevant to the things that are being compared on this particular point. You have a longer way of saying it, but that's basically what it comes down to. And you give a couple of explanations about why that's the case. Coaches and dietitians and folks like that don't really matter when you're doing the sports comparison. I think you need to have a stronger explanation about why they don't matter, because the advocate said, well, that's part of the traditional sports that we've been looking at. you're focusing very much on the format issue, and I think that that is not an unimportant argument, but if we're talking about analogies, and this is an analogy that the advocate is making here, every additional comparison that seems to be similar seems to strengthen their argument. I think that you could maybe suggest that the kinds of diets preparation or the kinds of training or the kinds of coaching that you get with esports is substantially different than you would have for traditional sports. I think that would be a stronger argument to make there than just that those are irrelevant. I'm not saying the irrelevant argument isn't worth making. I'm just saying you put all your eggs in that particular basket, and I think there are better arguments to make, especially if anybody does see them as being comparable. On the second point, the idea that they're living together and training together, and I like the idea that you say, well, this just sounds like a social relationship. It doesn't really sound like it's training. The fact that they're playing each other, so two guys playing video games against each other, they're in training for a sports competition. That seems like it stretches the definition of what training is. And I like the comparison that you make to swimming. Now you're using a personal example there, which I don't think is unreasonable, but it probably wouldn't hurt to have some other examples about what people who can engage in physical athletic accomplishments do, either in the amount of time that they spend, the muscles that they exercise, the devotion that and the difficulty with which they're doing those kinds of things. I do think that you kind of minimize a little bit what the training issues are for the esports folks. And then the comparison to basketball, this is where the format issue comes into play, and you basically say the only things that are comparable is that they have a tournament and it's streamed. And other than that, it doesn't really seem particularly significant. I appreciate that point. Maybe they've got weak examples of things that would establish a comparison. That's, I think, the argument that you want to be making. Not just that the formats, are the same, but this is not a strong enough comparison. I think that's what's implied by the three choices that you've made on those individual arguments, but it needs to be a little more forceful.